So welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. I'm Sally Leach from Henpicked and absolutely delighted to be here. Today to be talking all around PMDD, Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder. And I'm delighted to be joined by Phoebe Williams, who's the CEO and founder of the PMDD project. So welcome Phoebe to today's session.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for the warm welcome.
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful to have you here. So, Phoebe, we just wanted to really start off this session by helping people to understand what really is PMDD and how does it differ from what many people might talk about as PMS.
Yeah, so PMDD stands for Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder, and it's a condition that impacts roughly 1 in 20 individuals, although I think it's probably far greater than that, but due to the lack of awareness and research into the condition, we don't know enough about it and the impact it's having. But the difference between PMDD and PMS is, and I suppose they're on the same spectrum, but PMDD is on the far on the other end of that spectrum, and the symptoms are so intense that it can be classed as a disability under the Equality Act 2010. It's debilitating. It impacts a person's ability to work, ability to sustain relationships, and the symptoms that do occur, which I'll explain in a second, they occur in the luteal phase of a person's menstrual cycle. So that's the phase just before menstruation. And it can last around 1 to 2 weeks. And the best way to describe it is sort of like a monster taking over your brain. I always call it like the unwelcome visitor that takes over my brain and dictates my thoughts, my feelings, my behavior for those 2 weeks until I come on my period again and I'm back again and I feel like normal again. And the symptoms definitely vary person to person. Some people feel more physical symptoms, others experience the psychological symptoms, but generally, it tends to be severe anxiety, depression, loss of interest in usual activities, brain fog, insomnia, and so for some people, and actually it's quite common to experience suicidal thoughts. And I think there was a recent study in 2023 that, or 2024, that said that of the roughly 820,000 individuals impacted by PMDD in the UK, 275,000 will attempt suicide. So it's a condition that is taking people's lives, and it's just not known enough properly at the moment.
And in terms of recognizing the difference between if somebody is thinking that they may be experiencing this, what is it that would normally signify that someone is experiencing PMDD?
So I think, and so often it's always important to know as well, often people with PMDD will go and get help from the doctors and they might get misdiagnosed. That's a really common thing to happen, to get misdiagnosed for either PMS. And the significant difference between PMS and PMDD is that PMDD is debilitating. I think generally people tend to experience PMS and you can get, feeling irritable and you can have pains, but PMDD is life altering and it's almost like a complete change in behavior. It's a drastic change that, as I mentioned, affects your inability to cope with day-to-day life. And that's the huge difference. And I suppose the other often condition that often gets misdiagnosed is bipolar because of that drastic change in personality. So the one thing that makes it PMDD and signifies it as PMDD and sets it apart from the other conditions is that it's cyclical. So we always recommend people track their cycle because you will notice that it always occurs around the same time. If you have a normal period or a normal cycle, it will be based around your cycle, and you'll be able to tell that by tracking your symptoms. And it depends on the severity of them. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone shared in chat that their daughter was diagnosed with PMDD 3 years ago after being treated for depression and then bipolar. So I think, as you say, we see that as quite a
Yeah, absolutely. They the symptoms can overlap. They really can. With depression, they can absolutely overlap. And with my personal experience, I get incredibly depressed, unable to get out of bed and feeling so low. But I know it's not depression. I know it's PMDD because it happens every 2 weeks and it happens just before my period, and it's that cyclical nature of it. So it's just recognizing that, which is why tracking your cycle is so important.
yeah, absolutely. And just talk us through your own story in terms of your life with PMDD in terms of how you learned about it and what you do to kind of manage living with PMDD.
So I am 28 now and I've had PMDD, I'm guessing probably since I was 15. It's hard to tell because I didn't know what PMDD was until 2021. So, but I think I just look back and reflect on like my behavior and the way I used to feel, and it makes sense that it was PMDD. And so probably had it since I was 15, 14, 15 anyway. And my symptoms have always been incredibly severe right before my period. I would get incredibly irritable, really, really anxious to the point where it's debilitating, and I can't leave the house, and I can't string a sentence together. Um, and I then went to university and lived with my girl mates, and they all experienced periods, but they all had an absolutely fine time. You know, and it was me that was really struggling with my symptoms, and I couldn't tell why I was struggling so much, and my friends were getting on all right with their periods. I knew that something wasn't right. Kind of was in my head thinking there's something wrong with me, because I'd never heard of PMDD. I'd heard of PMS, and I thought, well, I'm being dramatic. I'm behaving really differently to all my friends, all my peers. Went to the doctors multiple times. One of them nearly tried to diagnose me with bipolar. And another one simply said I am being dramatic and should probably just crack on with it. But I think, and that really did knock my confidence. I stopped going to the doctors to seek help. And I ended up just thinking there must just be something wrong with me. It wasn't until the suicidal ideation began, which was probably post-university, and I began every month just desperately not wanting to be here. And that's not me normally. In the 2 weeks that I feel like me, I don't experience that. So, but it was an overriding, overwhelming sense of not wanting to be here during those 2 weeks that made me go, I need to do something about this. So again, had a bad experience with the doctors, but was researching it on Google night after night with my mum, who was worried about me as well. And we came across a blog article. Someone had just written about their own experience, and it word for word was what I've experienced. And it was like this light bulb moment of, oh my God, I feel seen. That's it. That's what I've got. And it was someone talking about PMDD. So I took that to the doctors, and I said, and to a new doctor, and I said, this is what I've got. I know for a fact this is what I've got. And I tracked my symptoms for a couple of months. And they said, I'm not going to lie, I've never heard of it before. But let me go away, do my research. And so he did, and he came back the next day and he said, yeah, you've absolutely got PMDD. And I got the diagnosis there and then. Um, and in terms of managing my symptoms, it's different for everybody. I can't stress that enough. And it has been very much a trial and error situation. I take SSRIs. It's reduced the severity of my symptoms. It's certainly not eradicated them. Lifestyle changes as well. So even little things like making sure not to drink caffeine, um, alcohol, sugars during the luteal phase because it really spikes my anxiety, and fatigue, and just generally trying to plan my fitness around my cycle. So making sure not to go all in, with strength training during the luteal phase because my body can't handle it, and just listening to what my body needs. Yeah, there's lots of different things, but it really is different for everybody.
And I think that comes on, I can see loads of people sharing. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing because it's really appreciated. And we'll come to some of those questions, which are some really great questions coming in. But in terms of diagnosing, I know we've talked about that a little bit. Is there a specific way that somebody would be diagnosed with PMDD, and then the kind of ways of managing symptoms in terms of those treatment options? Because I know someone said that they've been talked about being put on antidepressants, but they know they're not depressed. But we know that is one of the ways. So just to talk through a little bit, first of all, how would the diagnosis process normally go? And then
Yeah.
what kind of treatment options are available?
So in terms of diagnosis, it's a really tricky, it's tricky. I think the best thing to say is being persistent. I had to be persistent. Everyone in the PMDD community does have to be, and you might need a third, second, fourth opinion because more often than not, healthcare professionals don't know what PMDD is. They don't recognise it because it's not a part of the curriculum in medical school. Um, and so it's very much about being your own advocate. And so to get the diagnosis, it can be classed or under the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic criteria for healthcare professionals to diagnose someone. And they have to recognise, I think there's about 5 symptoms on that list. So what I recommend someone doing who is struggling to get the diagnosis is track their cycle for at least 2 months. That's not just in the luteal phase, so that's not just when you're experiencing those severe symptoms. That's every single day of the cycle, because that way the doctor or the healthcare professional can recognise it as cyclical and they can understand the pattern a little bit more, and they can sort of tick off any other potential conditions that it may be. Um, and it's just to be persistent. If you don't have good luck, if you have a bad experience with one doctor, keep trying. Maybe ask to speak to a gynecologist or a women's health specialist or an endocrinologist, so hormone health specialist. And then in terms of the treatment, um, it's very varied for everybody. And for some, lifestyle changes and supplements make a huge difference, whether that be calcium, magnesium, vitamin B6. But for others, SSRIs have been known to be really useful. And there's a lot of reluctance around SSRIs, and I totally understand that and respect that. Actually, I've learned that there's recent research that's come out that you can do luteal dosing. So you don't have to take the SSRIs every day of the month if you don't want to. You can just do it during the luteal phase. And there have been research studies that have proven for that to be a success. And in terms of the withdrawal symptoms, it's proven to be quite successful. Again, for any of this, you'd need to speak to a healthcare professional. For some, because PMDD can be caused by trauma, so for some, going down the avenue of therapy or counselling or CBT has also had seen really successful results. And yeah, just really honing in on the lifestyle changes as well and recognizing that so many little factors will make a huge impact, whether that be stress management and focusing on that and how your everyday impacts your PMDD symptoms, or just your lifestyle and what are you doing that you could maybe change to reduce the severity of anxiety or brain fog or fatigue and that sort of thing. So there's lots of options. We do have more options on our website as well if anyone wants to just have a little read about it.
Yeah, so I've shared the link for the PMDD project because I really like the toolkit for when people are having really tough days. I think it's almost creating that own toolkit of those things that can help support you on those really tough days. I thought that was a really useful, practical tool to be able to use. Someone's just asked, what is an SSRI?
Oh, sorry. So an SSRI, now the medical professional in me, I'm not one, doesn't know what it stands for. So I'm just going to check. However, it's like an antidepressant. So selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, because for people with PMDD, what PMDD is, it's a sensitivity to hormone fluctuations. So we have it's not a chemical imbalance. We have the same amount of hormones as someone without PMDD. It's just our sensitivity to those fluctuations. But as a result of that, our serotonin drops massively during the luteal phase. So SSRIs, and typically I think it's fluoxetine, which is supposed to be the number one for PMDD, just helps rebalance the serotonin levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a few things here around, yeah, someone said around at what stage would can someone develop PMDD? Can it be brought on by things? And you mentioned about trauma and just kind of just talking a little bit around when this might show up for somebody and actually are there things that can trigger that starting?
Yeah, so PMDD can be caused by different things actually. And my instance is it's caused by genetics. My mum had it and her mum had it as well. Or they believe they did. They weren't really aware of it at the time. But for some, it can be caused by trauma. And there is studies coming out about that. And we're actually working on a resource on that, which I will share as soon as we have it, um, about the link between the two. And it can be childhood trauma. It can be in your adult life. And actually, PMDD can come on at any time. Um, for some people, they find that after giving birth, they can experience PMDD. So prior to having children, they'd never experienced. And other people say that in their 30s, it tends to develop most frequently. It really is different for everybody, to be honest. And there are lots of different causes. And I suppose the lack of research is not helping with our understanding of that. But yeah, it can occur sort of anytime, and it has a massive relation to menopause as well, which I can explain a
Right.
little bit further. Another interesting sort of relation I wanted to mention as well is we're really starting to find out more and more about the link between PMDD and neurodiversity. So I can't remember the exact statistic, but someone with autism, there's 90 something percent of people will have PMDD. There is a huge link between the two and ADHD as well. Um, and that's interesting to know as well, because I think in terms of the diagnosis process for autistic women, we're quite far behind in terms of where we should be. And they actually go hand in hand. So recognizing that link is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on the note of perimenopause, menopause, lots of people have been talking about this and just saying, how can, yeah, perimenopause and going into menopause affect PMDD, or how does PMDD affect menopause? Just kind of talking through those links.
Yeah, so I think if you have experienced PMDD, your menopause is likely to be quite a difficult experience. And that's because PMDD, they're both sort of driven by those hormonal fluctuations, particularly changes in estrogen and progesterone. But for people with PMDD, we have a really heightened sensitivity to hormonal fluctuations. And so when you approach perimenopause and menopause, your hormonal levels become more irregular. And that really throws you off balance, and that can make your PMDD symptoms worse. And actually, from the symptoms that I've already mentioned, such as brain fog and insomnia, and as well as physical symptoms as well, but the depression and anxiety and feeling like someone's taken over, it very much overlaps with the menopause symptoms as well. So there's a definite link between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of then actually identifying what's going on for somebody, actually recognizing, is something caused by perimenopause? Is it PMDD? Again, any thoughts around how people might be able to navigate their way through that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is just to read up as much as possible. I think being your own advocate and understanding your body as well is the most important thing and how it works. A lot of people have irregular cycles, particularly if you're beginning menopause. And so it's difficult to navigate that in itself. But the number one tip for me is tracking your symptoms every single day so you can be as prepared as possible for the inevitable crash. But you can also, and you can plan your sort of lifestyle around it. If you are fortunate enough to have a job where you can be not public facing for a week of the month and you can do admin stuff, then try and do that. If you can plan your social life around it, then try best to do that. You've got to really just listen to your body and its needs, because what your body is going through is a huge, huge hormonal shift. And it's just being sensitive to that and recognizing that, and really I know exactly what day of my cycle I'm on, and it's really helped me just take control of it. So yeah.
Absolutely. And a few people have talked about feeling, times when they felt suicidal and things. I think just one of the really important things to say to anybody during this call who's feeling like that, please reach out and get help and
Absolutely.
support, whether that's through family and friends, through your GP, through organisations like Samaritans. Please don't let anyone be suffering and struggling at any stage with those feelings without getting help and support, because I think that's the
Absolutely.
important thing we want to advocate for.
100%. I think, with PMDD, for a lot of the community, we feel there's a certain level of shame, and there absolutely shouldn't be, but a certain level of shame, and it can feel quite a lonely condition, because we don't want to admit that we're feeling this way because of periods, because we've been told and programmed for years and years that, you know, it's a natural part of being a woman or person who menstruates. And so to say we're struggling is, it can be difficult, but actually the most important thing to know is it's not normal to experience PMDD. You aren't wrong or abnormal for having PMDD, for a condition that you never asked for. And so asking for help is perfectly okay, and actually really, really encourage you asking for help. You shouldn't be experiencing suicidal thoughts, and you shouldn't be alone in that either. It can be an incredibly isolating condition. So we'd always recommend, if you're in a crisis, to reach out to a crisis helpline, to reach out to the PMDD project, to reach out to emergency services. And if you're fortunate enough to have a network of people around you, family, friends, reach out to them and let them know. Because as well, if you do have loved ones that you're able to talk to about PMDD with, let them know what your triggers are as well, because for some people, there might be certain things that trigger their anxiety or trigger their insecurity, a lot of self-doubt comes with PMDD. And so allowing your peers to understand how best to work around your cycle is a huge makes a huge difference to your symptoms.
Absolutely. Someone just asked about recording of the session. We'll be putting the recording into the Henpicked Hub, and it should be available by tomorrow. So you should be able to share this with people. And it's great. We really want as many people as possible to be part of this conversation because, as you say, it's still so unrecognised for many people. And then in terms of support, when we think around this, in particular, you talked a little bit around working around your cycle, working around your friends and family. What advice would you give to somebody who is really struggling with PMDD in terms of the first steps? We've also got tracking the cycle, but in terms of actually starting to think about how they're going to navigate and live with this condition, because it's not something we can get rid of. It's yeah. So what would your advice be?
I genuinely believe tapping into the PMDD community makes a huge difference. Find your people, because as I mentioned earlier, with it being an isolating condition, a condition where you feel shame and you feel reluctant to reach out to people who don't understand it. Reaching out to those who do makes a huge difference. It validates how you feel, it makes you feel seen and understood. And so the PMDD project do have a community of people who are there to listen and support, because sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes you don't need the answers, you just need to be listened to. And I suppose it's just planning your whole life around that, which I know sounds quite daunting, but if you get in control of your diary, so you're able to control your social life and make sure that you're making the most out of the weeks when you are feeling like you won't you won't feel like your life has been stripped away by PMDD. We won't feel like it defines you as much as if you were sort of being controlled by the PMDD symptoms. Doing as much research into it as possible. There is new research coming out. We are slowly starting to see research being funded, which is brilliant to see, and keeping up to date with that. Um, yeah, speaking to the community and just knowing what works for you. So, for example, if you're a parent with PMDD, we always recommend having a bit of a toolkit. So when you're really struggling and people really do struggle being a parent with PMDD, have a little luteal phase toolkit that you can give to your children to when you need to take a step back, you need to relax and your brain just isn't cooperating and you feel yourself getting irritable. Have a box ready full of things in there that can distract your children, keep them busy, keep them occupied without putting too much strain on you. Or if you can communicate with your peers and maybe they can support and help with responsibilities, then absolutely tap into that as well. It's just finding what works for you because it is so incredibly the symptoms are so varied for each person. So it's just yeah, it's finding what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone shared here, thank you so much for that, is one tip I had was helpful was to have a treasure box with things in ready for PMDD. Mine included go-to films, verses and words from people close to me about how I'm valued, easy to access and there when immediately needed. And I think that really feeds into the toolkit piece we were talking about on the PMDD project. It's those things that help support you through that really tough time.
Definitely. And it's just allowing yourself to slow down as well. I think we're in a world where we have to be going a million miles an hour and work can be incredibly stressful on our PMDD as well because we feel like we have to keep up all the time. And when we're out of the luteal phase and we feel like us again, we sort of overcompensate by making up for lost time. And actually it's just allowing yourself for the 2 weeks that you feel awful, it's actually going, no, do you know what? This is a disability. This is a condition that I can't control. I need to rest. I need to listen to my body, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to go 100 miles an hour every day of the month. Your body's kind of like it, I kind of see it as different seasons. So when I go into the luteal phase, it's like my winter. So I go into hibernation phase because that's what my body's asking me to do. And then when I'm in the follicular phase, so the phase where I feel like me, it's summer. So I'm out and I can do things and I can get back to socializing and things like that. So it's just really listening to your body.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. And just to talk to us a little bit about the PMDD project, because somebody just said around we need GPs and psychiatrists to be trained around this, and I know that's something that the charity's really passionate about. So just talk to us a little bit about what the PMDD project is and that work you're doing to focus on healthcare education and community support.
Yeah, so we founded a year and a half ago now. And our mission is to support people impacted by PMDD. So that's people directly impacted, like myself, and people indirectly impacted. So our loved ones, they need to know how to support themselves, but also us during that time of need. Healthcare professionals, because right now, it's not recognised as a crisis condition that it is, and they aren't taught about it in medical school, and therefore they're not equipped to support people in the doctor's room. So we are just training healthcare professionals to better understand it and how to recognise it in patients and businesses as well. We want to train businesses and organisations and employees and HR leaders on PMDD and just really open up that conversation that extends to schools too and communities as a whole, just to provide people with the language to navigate PMDD. So we do that in three ways. We provide support. We've got tons of resources on our website, and we're actually developing tons more at the moment. So they'll hopefully be released by the end of the new year, by the end of the year. We have support groups sort of dotted across the UK as well. We are raising awareness, so again, the healthcare training, the business training, and that sort of thing, and we support research as well. So I mentioned earlier, it's very far and few between the research on PMDD, but any research that we can support, we absolutely do. So yeah, if anyone wants to know any more information as well, they're very welcome to email or message me after this.
Yeah, fantastic. I popped the website in the chat, and there really are, so if you go to the link that I've put in the chat, there's those downloadable resources. There's so much in there that really are practical things, and whether that's for you personally, and I know people have shared, I really appreciate people sharing really openly their own experiences, or they're supporting you. We've had quite a few people showing that they're sharing with or they're supporting their children through this, and that
Yeah.
as a parent, I think supporting someone, and so you must come across that in terms of any top tips for parents whose child has been diagnosed, anything that we can do as parents to be able to support our children.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly difficult for parents to see their child go through that each month and to see two personalities, that it's like they lose their child for a couple of weeks. So actually the most important thing is to look after your own well-being as well. And we do have a community of people who are the loved ones who are struggling with it and it's important to look after your well-being, and we do have, more advice on that. But just to sort of be in tune with their cycle as well. And sometimes I think it's really difficult for us as the PMDD sufferer to vocalize how we're feeling, or if we do go and seek help, to be our own advocate. If you can go with your child to the doctor's room, and if you can be their advocate for them, because I think during the luteal phase, when you've got the brain fog, when you've got the anxiety, you can't express how you're feeling. And then when you're out of the luteal phase, of course, you're back to normal, and it's difficult to say how you're feeling because you don't associate with that person. So if you can be their advocate and you can stand by them and sort of make as many notes as possible, and doing your research as well. And I suppose the other tip as well is, you don't have to have the answers. Sometimes we just need to be listened to. We just need a good cry. We just need a good shout. And that's the best thing you can do. We don't need all the answers, and we're not expecting you to have the answers as well. Um, but yeah, I'd say the number one thing is making sure that your well-being is looked after as well.
Fantastic. Then, yeah, I just want to say there's some amazing comments you'll have to read after, Phoebe, just around how much people appreciate the work you're doing,
Oh,
that it's so wonderful that people in the future, women in the future, aren't going to have to be going through this without it being talked about. And so I just really want to say a huge thank you to Phoebe for joining us. It's a charity that we really care about, and we're delighted that so much more work is being done in this space, and really appreciate everyone joining. As always, on
yeah.
these sessions, people being really honest and open and sharing their stories. It really is appreciated. And so please do check out the PMDD project. We'll be putting the recording on the Henpicked Hub, and we'll also do a write-up with links to all of the things that Phoebe's mentioned as well in the session today. But thank you everyone very much for joining.
Thank you so much.